These dinners disappeared not because they failed, but because they belonged to people who survived quietly in the hills while history looked away. What you are about to hear are 10 forgotten hillbilly dinners that once turned gardens, forests, and bare pantries into daily survival, meals so practical and powerful that entire families depended on them to get through another day. If you miss even one, you miss how food once meant survival, memory, and identity in rural America. Hey there, welcome to Grandma Garden's Secret. If you are new here, please take a moment to hit the subscribe button, and thank you to all the returning viewers who continue to support this journey. Your presence keeps these stories alive. Many of these dinners began in backyard gardens, small plots, and poor soil, grown once and used again and again. If you enjoy gardening, struggle with growing food, or have questions about seeds, soil, or seasons, please share them in the comments. If you have suggestions or memories, share those too. I read every comment with care, and I will always try my best to help in a simple and honest way. Now let us step into the hills and begin with the first forgotten dinner. Poke sallet was never a choice made for curiosity. It was a decision made between hunger and survival, and that is exactly why it deserves to be remembered first. Long before supermarkets reached the mountains, families relied on what returned every spring without being planted, and pokeweed was one of the most dependable plants in the hills. Grown wild along fence lines and creek beds, young poke leaves were carefully harvested, boiled multiple times to remove toxins, and then cooked down with salt pork or bacon grease into a bitter, nourishing dish that fed generations. This meal reflected deep plant knowledge passed quietly from elders to children, because one mistake could be fatal, yet one success could feed a household. Appalachian families treated poke sallet with respect, understanding its danger and its value, a balance rarely seen in modern food culture. According to Foxfire Book 1, collected through interviews with Appalachian elders, poke sallet was considered a seasonal staple that signaled winter had truly ended. Agricultural records discussed in the University of Kentucky's Extension Food History Studies note that wild greens like poke provided essential vitamins when stored foods ran low. The dish required patience, caution, and experience, qualities that shaped mountain cooking as much as flavor did. Served alongside cornbread or potatoes, poke sallet became more than food, it became proof that knowledge could keep you alive. As gardens failed and money disappeared, this humble plate reminded families that survival still grew from the land if you knew where to look. This is why poke sallet faded from modern tables, not because it lacked meaning, but because the knowledge that protected it slowly disappeared with the people who carried it. Bean leather and cornbread was a dinner born from fear of winter, when gardens failed and stores were days away by foot. Families in the Appalachian Hills dried green beans on strings hung across porches and rafters, turning summer abundance into thin, leathery strips that could last for months. When cold weather arrived, those dried beans were soaked, slow-cooked, and flavored with a small piece of fatback or ham bone, creating a meal that filled the house with a deep, comforting smell. This dish mattered because it proved that nothing grown with hard work would be wasted. Cornbread completed the plate, baked daily from stone-ground cornmeal, often without eggs or milk, because those were not guaranteed. Together, bean leather and cornbread formed a dependable dinner that sustained families through long winters when cash was scarce and roads were impassable. The preparation demanded planning, patience, and knowledge of preservation, skills passed down through generations rather than written recipes. In Foxfire Book 2, Appalachian families describe drying beans as a yearly ritual tied to survival rather than taste. Food preservation research from West Virginia University Agricultural Archives confirms that drying beans was one of the most efficient methods available to mountain households before refrigeration. This dinner represented foresight, discipline, and respect for the growing season. It also reinforced community values, because neighbors often shared dried beans when one family ran short. Bean leather faded from modern kitchens as freezers replaced rafters and store shelves replaced gardens. Yet its memory remains powerful, reminding us that simple food once carried the weight of survival, teaching families how to endure, adapt, and trust the land to carry them through another winter. These meals shaped resilience, teaching children that careful saving today meant warmth, strength, and full stomachs tomorrow during the harshest seasons. Soup, beans, and fatback was not a side dish or a background meal, it was the center of life in the Appalachian Hills, carrying families through years when money and certainty were both scarce. Dried pinto beans were soaked overnight, then simmered slowly for hours in cast iron pots, allowing them to soften and thicken into a rich, earthy broth. A small piece of fatback or salt pork was added, not for luxury, but to provide essential calories and flavor that kept bodies working through long days of labor. This dinner mattered because it could be made repeatedly without exhausting the pantry, and it relied on ingredients that stored well without spoilage. Cornbread was served alongside, used to soak up every drop, because nothing was wasted. Soup, beans taught patience, because rushing them ruined the meal, and they taught humility, because the same dish appeared week after week without complaint. In Foxfire Book 3, Appalachian families recalled soup beans as a meal that signaled stability during uncertain times. Research from the University of Tennessee Agricultural History Collections explains that dried beans were one of the most reliable protein sources available to rural mountain households. This dinner also carried social meaning, as neighbors often judged a household not by wealth, but by whether a pot of beans was always ready to share. Soup beans faded from daily tables as packaged food replaced slow cooking and shared meals. Yet this dish remains a quiet lesson in endurance, showing how simple food, prepared with care, sustained families, strengthened communities, and filled homes with warmth when very little else was guaranteed. Corn pone was not merely a type of bread. It was a lifeline in the hills where wheat was scarce and store-bought flour was a rare luxury. Made from coarsely ground cornmeal, water, and a pinch of salt, this dense, golden bread baked slowly on a griddle or in a cast-iron skillet over an open hearth. Families in Appalachian homes relied on corn pone because it could be made quickly, with ingredients grown in their own fields, and it could accompany nearly every meal. During hard times, corn pone became the constant companion of beans, greens, or a small piece of salted meat, providing calories and a comforting, familiar texture. Its simplicity disguised the skill required. Too little heat, and it stuck. Too much, and it burned. Generations learned by trial, turning out a product that fed bodies and warmed spirits. In Appalachian Home Cooking from Berea College Press, elders recounted that corn pone was more than food, it was identity, tied to the rhythm of planting, harvest, and family labor. Researchers from the University of Kentucky note that corn-based breads sustained isolated mountain households long before modern conveniences reached the hills. Corn pone also held cultural significance. At community gatherings, a fresh batch on the table symbolized generosity and resourcefulness. Children grew accustomed to the aroma, the texture, and the way it filled the kitchen with warmth, creating memories linked not to luxury, but to resilience. As white bread and modern ovens became more accessible, corn pone slowly vanished from everyday tables, replaced by convenience over tradition. Yet its story remains a testament to endurance and ingenuity, showing how Appalachian families used minimal ingredients to create sustenance, comfort, and identity. Corn pone reminds us that survival was never accidental. It was cultivated, kneaded, and baked into each generation, one golden loaf at a time. Fried apple cornbread was never considered a dessert for indulgence. It was a celebration of resourcefulness and a reminder that even the simplest ingredients could become something remarkable. In Appalachian homes, families combined leftover corn pone or fresh cornbread with tart, hand-picked apples from backyard trees, then fried the mixture in a small amount of lard or butter. The result was a warm, golden dish with caramelized edges, soft inside, and a subtle sweetness that contrasted perfectly with the dense bread. This meal mattered because it used what was available, avoided waste, and turned modest ingredients into comfort and nourishment for hungry children and hard-working adults alike. Every family had a slightly different method. Some added a touch of molasses, others a pinch of cinnamon, but all agreed that timing and heat were crucial to avoid burning. According to Foxfire Book 4, elders remembered fried apple cornbread as a dish that marked special occasions or simple Sunday dinners when the household could spare a few extra ingredients. Appalachian agricultural research at the University of Tennessee highlights how seasonal fruit, such as apples, extended the variety of mountain diets and brought essential vitamins during long winters. This dish also carried emotional weight. Children would gather in the kitchen as the smell of apples and corn filled the air, and grandparents would teach the next generation how to prepare it with care. Fried apple cornbread slowly faded from everyday tables as modern convenience foods became available, yet it remains a symbol of ingenuity, patience, and love. Its story reminds us that food was never just about hunger. It was about family, learning, and making the most of what the land provided. Even today, this forgotten dinner invites us to pause, appreciate simple ingredients, and honor the wisdom baked into every generation of Appalachian homes. Corn soup was not a dish of luxury or flavor alone. It was survival poured into a pot, simmered slowly to stretch limited resources and fill the bellies of entire families. In Appalachian homes, dried or fresh corn kernels were soaked and boiled with water or thin stock, sometimes enriched with small pieces of salt pork, fatback, or wild greens for added nutrition and flavor. This humble soup transformed simple ingredients into a hearty, sustaining meal that could last several days, feeding families with minimal waste. The texture varied by household, with some preferring it thick and porridge-like, while others kept it brothy to pair with cornbread. What made corn soup remarkable was its adaptability. Every cook knew how to balance available ingredients with the demands of hunger and the limitations of the season. According to Foxfire Book 5, Appalachian elders described corn soup as a foundational meal, especially during the harsh winter months when fresh vegetables were scarce. Research from the University of Kentucky's Appalachian Studies archives confirms that corn-based soups provided essential calories and nutrients when protein was limited and markets were inaccessible. This dinner also reinforced community bonds, as neighbors often exchanged small amounts of corn, pork, or vegetables to ensure everyone had enough for their pots. Corn soup faded from common tables as modern conveniences, frozen vegetables, and store-bought meals replaced slow-cooked staples, yet its significance remains. It reminds us that cooking in the mountains was not an art of abundance, but a practice of care, discipline, and foresight. Corn soup was a daily lesson in resilience, teaching children how to make the most of what the land provided, and shaping a culture where meals were never taken for granted. In every simmering pot, there was history, memory, and the quiet triumph of families who endured, adapted, and thrived despite scarcity. Hog jowl and beans was not prepared for flavor alone. It was a strategic meal, crafted to provide protein, fat, and warmth to families living in isolation and scarcity. Hog jowl, the cured or smoked cheek of a pig, was often one of the few preserved meats available to mountain households, prized for its long shelf life and rich taste. Paired with pinto or field beans, slowly simmered in cast-iron pots, it created a hearty, satisfying dinner that could sustain children and adults through long, cold nights. This meal mattered because it combined preservation knowledge with careful cooking, stretching a small amount of meat across an entire family. The beans absorbed the smoky, salty fat, and every drop of broth was treasured, often served with cornbread to make the meal complete. Appalachian families learned to cook hog jowl with beans through observation, trial, and oral tradition. Too little heat, and the meat remained tough. Too much, and the beans turned mushy. In Foxfire Book 6, elders recalled that this dish was central to the winter diet, a reliable combination when markets were distant or money was scarce. Agricultural research from the University of Tennessee confirms that cured pork provided essential protein and calories in isolated rural households where hunting or livestock was limited. Hog jowl and beans also carried emotional and cultural significance. The act of cooking and sharing it reinforced family bonds, taught children patience and respect for food, and demonstrated the resourcefulness needed to survive in the hills. As refrigeration and packaged foods became common, this dish faded from everyday tables, yet its memory endures as a testament to ingenuity, endurance, and practicality. Hog jowl and beans shows us that Appalachian cooking was never accidental. It was carefully crafted, deeply rooted in tradition, and a lifeline for families who depended on both skill and the generosity of the land to survive. Fried cornmeal mush was never a meal of convenience. It was a morning ritual that shaped the rhythm of life in Appalachian homes, sustaining families through long workdays in the fields or forests. Cornmeal was mixed with water or milk, boiled slowly into a thick porridge, and then poured into a pan to cool and firm. Once solid, the mush was sliced and fried in lard or bacon grease until golden and crisp on the outside, soft and warm within. This simple yet versatile dish could be served with syrup, molasses, or a sprinkle of sugar when available, but it needed nothing more than careful cooking to nourish and satisfy. Appalachian families depended on fried cornmeal mush because it transformed inexpensive, stored ingredients into a filling, repeatable meal that could feed both children and adults. The preparation demanded patience and attention, as too little cooking caused mush to crumble, and too much created a burnt crust. In Foxfire Book 7, elders described fried cornmeal mush as a constant presence at the table, especially in households where mornings were long and labor was heavy. University of Kentucky research on Appalachian dietary history confirms that cornmeal-based breakfasts were critical for energy, providing sustained calories when other foods were scarce. This dish also fostered a sense of community and teaching, as parents passed down techniques for achieving the perfect texture and flavor. Fried cornmeal mush gradually disappeared from common tables as prepackaged cereals and modern breakfasts replaced time-intensive preparation, yet it remains a symbol of resourcefulness and endurance. Every golden slice carried lessons in frugality, patience, and respect for food. Today, remembering fried cornmeal mush reminds us that sustenance was more than nutrition. It was care, culture, and the quiet triumph of families who turned simple ingredients into daily acts of survival and love. Liver pudding was never a dish for extravagance. It was a testament to Appalachian ingenuity, transforming every part of a slaughtered hog into sustenance for families who could not afford waste. Made from ground pork liver, fat, and a mixture of cornmeal and spices, the pudding was carefully formed into loaves and cooked slowly, often in a cast-iron skillet or large pot. The result was a dense, rich meal that could be sliced and fried, eaten cold, or incorporated into other dishes. This dinner mattered because it provided essential nutrients, including protein and iron, at a time when fresh meat was limited and expensive. Appalachian households passed down the preparation process through generations, teaching children not only how to cook, but also how to respect every part of the animal. Mistakes could ruin a batch, so patience and precision were vital. According to Foxfire Book 8, elders remembered liver pudding as a regular feature of mountain tables, particularly during winter or after butchering, when families needed meals that could be stored and reused. Research from the University of Tennessee on Appalachian food traditions confirms that pork-based puddings were both practical and critical for survival, stretching limited meat into multiple meals. Liver pudding also carried cultural weight. It represented thrift, resourcefulness, and the ability of a family to care for itself without outside help. As modern meat processing and convenience foods became widespread, liver pudding faded from everyday meals, but its legacy remains. It teaches us that Appalachian cooking was grounded in respect, skill, and necessity. Every loaf of liver pudding tells a story of survival, careful planning, and the quiet pride of families who knew how to make the most of the land and livestock they had, creating nourishment from what others might overlook. Chicken and dumplings was never just a comfort dish. It was a lifeline for Appalachian families, turning a single bird into a meal capable of feeding an entire household. In mountain homes, a whole chicken was simmered slowly in water or thin broth until tender, its meat used to flavor the pot and provide sustenance for those who labored long hours in the fields or woods. Flour, water, and a pinch of salt were mixed into simple dough and dropped into the simmering liquid as dumplings, expanding and absorbing the rich, savory essence of the chicken and any vegetables that could be spared from the garden. This meal mattered because it maximized every ingredient. Nothing was wasted, and the resulting stew nourished both body and spirit. Appalachian families learned to make chicken and dumplings from elders who stressed careful timing and gentle stirring to avoid tearing the delicate dough or overcooking the chicken. In Foxfire Book 9, mountain residents recalled that chicken and dumplings was often reserved for special occasions, Sunday dinners, or when families needed a hearty, reliable meal during the harsh winter months. Historical research from the University of Kentucky's Appalachian Studies collection confirms that this dish represented a convergence of thrift, resourcefulness, and flavor, allowing even small households to enjoy a satisfying feast. The stew also carried emotional resonance. Preparing it required patience and care, and sharing it reinforced family bonds while teaching children skills they would carry for life. As modern convenience foods became more prevalent, chicken and dumplings gradually disappeared from everyday tables, yet its memory endures as a symbol of survival, tradition, and ingenuity. Every simmering pot was an exercise in making the most of limited resources, reminding us that Appalachian cooking was grounded not in luxury, but in creativity, respect for ingredients, and the enduring strength of family and community.